I think what we do with history usually centers whiteness, and I wanted to do something that centered really the foundation of Durham. Durham is a city built on vibrant creativity and resiliency. Though its past and present are marked with pain and injustice, the people of Durham continue to overcome and persevere. To understand where we are as a city and the communities that live herein, we must do the crucial and uncomfortable work of investigating Durham's difficult history. I want to say there's going to be some really difficult topics in this, especially for people of color, because again, this history really centers on Black history predominantly. If at any point you feel uncomfortable and need to leave, please feel welcome to. You don't need to stay where you don't feel comfortable. But I do challenge you to sit in discomfort and learn this history.
Should we shut the door?
I think I should have. We're having technical difficulties with a tiny piece of technology.
It's changing on this screen.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. All right. It flips like Bluetooth or something. So it's. I am smart.
What was it that you just worked through?
It was clicked on the incorrect screen.
Oh.
Yes. There's one that's just the PowerPoint, and then there's one that's the actual presentation. It was clicked on the PowerPoint. So this presentation will give a very brief overview of the colonization of the land that we live and work on, and the removal of the indigenous peoples who cultivated and prospered here. It will quickly touch on Stagville Plantation, where many Black Durhamites can trace their ancestry to and descendancy from. This will lead into the formation of Hayti and Black Wall Street, the thriving Black business and industry center of the mid-1900s. It will then touch on Durham's involvement in the civil rights movement before transitioning to the Urban Renewal Project beginning in 1958 and the subsequent destruction of Hayti and the end of Black Wall Street. Finally, it will finish on the continued gentrification of our beloved Durham and how urban renewal and gentrification have affected predominantly the marginalized citizens and populations of Durham. My hopes for this presentation are that you will come to better understand how Durham has been shaped, how this has affected its citizens, and provide insight into the lives of some of the residents of Durham. So first topic is colonization, slavery, and settlement. Circa 1600s through 1865, and the establishment first of Durham City in 1853, and subsequently Durham County in 1881. First, I would like to begin with the forebearers of Durham, and it would be egregious for me to not acknowledge the custodians of the land on which we live, work, and thrive. As we are all coming here from different areas, I want to share this quote with you from Northwestern University. It is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought you to reside on the land and to seek to understand your place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. I encourage you to take the time to learn about these tribal peoples that we're going to be talking about, to discover whose land you live on and benefit from, and to research the ways in which you can support local tribal communities, whether financially, politically, or socially. Indigenous tribes and removal. So in this room, it's really, really hard to see. I did not do my homework to see how small this text would be. This first picture here is actually a website that you can use to see whose land you live on. It's native-land.ca. So a couple of sources point to the area of Durham Durham belonging to the Occaneechi, Eno, and Shakori tribes. But indigenous lands are more complex than colonial ideals of land and include not just settlements, but territory marked for hunting and resource gathering. For this purpose, I have included both a map of tribal nations and peoples in the area, as well as the official demarcation of the county of Durham on a modern map. Durham County was possibly part of the following nations: Tuscarora, Occaneechi, Chiraw, Lumbee, Catawba, Eno, and Shakori. It is thought to be the site of an ancient Native American village named Atchishire, which was mostly Eno and Shakori. The Great Indian Trading Path is traced through Durham, with Native communities establishing settlement sites, transportation routes, and environmentally friendly patterns of natural resource use. Most of these nations were forced to sign treaties with the occupying governments, such as the states of Virginia and North and South Carolina. The Chiraw were partially absorbed into the Catawba, and some Lumbee members today claim Chiraw descendancy. The Eno people also were absorbed into the Lumbee. The Occaneechi, found primarily near Hillsborough when recorded by English explorer John Lawson in the early 1700s, merged together with some of the Sapani and Tutelo peoples after the Treaty of Peace of 1713. Today, they are known as the Occaneechi Band of Sapani Nation and reside on reservation in Alamance County, North Carolina. Of the tribes listed here, only the Occaneechi Band of Sapani and Lumbee tribes are recognized by the state of North Carolina, and only the Tuscarora and Catawba are federally recognized. Descendants of the Tuscarora are primarily located in Upper New York and Canada, and the Catawba are primarily located in South Carolina. Colonization and settlement. After the removal of local indigenous peoples, European colonizers were free to settle the area. Beginning in the 1720s and peaking in the early 1770s, waves of Scottish, Irish, and English immigrants began settling in North Carolina with land grants provided by King Charles I. Slavery was an integral part of Orange County economy by the late 1700s, with the largest population of enslaved people in the North Carolina Piedmont. By the end of the Civil War, Stagville Plantation enslaved over 900 men, women, and children on 30,000 acres. I think the PowerPoint says 1,000. There are different sources that say 900 and other sources that say 1,000. I've found conflicting information on Stagville's site, as well as at the actual Stagville tour. So I think it's 1,000. Either way, it's a lot. Tobacco was always a major crop for North Carolina, with the development of Brightleaf in 1839 and the construction of the railroad in the 1850s and 1860s, causing the market to increase significantly for the area. I wanted to add some photographs of people of color in the area doing work that they would have done prior to the end of the Civil War. But these are more modern. So you have a black farmer here from about 1920 who was working in a on a tobacco farm. And then these were women in a tobacco plant who were taking stems off of tobacco. Almost all of the photographs in this PowerPoint are from the North Carolina collection, and you can find them all online. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is watch a video that was done by a news station here in Durham, and it's about Stagville Plantation.
February is Black History Month. The time set aside to raise awareness about people and events not often included in the history books.
Some of that history doesn't include slavery. I want to start us here. That is historic sites in our state are working to change that perception.
Slavery has often been called America's original sin, a topic many people don't feel comfortable discussing and would often gloss over in American history. But now a number of historic sites in North Carolina are looking to tell a more full and inclusive story about slavery in our state. Traveling down a gravel road in Durham County, pine trees towering on both sides, we arrive at Stagville Plantation, a place that helped define North Carolina history.
North Carolina would not be North Carolina, our nation would not be our nation, without the labor, the forced free labor of millions of African Americans.
Dr. Arlen Smallwood is professor and chair of the history department at North Carolina A&T State University.
The planting and harvesting and cultivating of tobacco from the colonial period through the antebellum period really built the state of North Carolina.
And Stagville played a major role. This house, one of the few remaining on the property, was the first in what became one of the largest plantation complexes in the South.
There were about 900 men, women, and children who were enslaved here and held captive on that land.
The land, 50 square miles, 30,000 acres, owned by the Benahan and Cameron families, who became some of the wealthiest in the state.
Legacy in the United States of plantation sites failing to tell a full and inclusive history.
Vera Sosowski, site director at Historic Stagville, says the focus today is on the people who were never photographed, enslaved men, women, and children who labored from sunrise to sunset, worked the fields, cooked the food, and built houses. People who dreamed of a life outside these walls, free from the horrors of slavery.
The master had the right to separate the husband from the wife, separate children from the parents, and sell them off. And who would like to have their 13-year-old daughter taken from them and sold to the plantation owner who possibly could rape or molest that child?
This office space at Stagville was where the plantation owner kept notes on the births of enslaved children and records of slave trade.
It's the first enslaved person that we know of here in 1771. That was a 12-year-old boy named Scrub who was brought here from Norfolk, Virginia.
13 years later, Scrub was a fugitive, a $30 reward offered for his capture.
Slaves resisted the institution whenever they could. They would slow down work, destroy barns, destroy farm equipment. They ran away.
Mary Walker, the caregiver for this girl, a Cameron daughter described as sickly, ran away during a medical trip.
She, like many enslaved women here, was facing a renewed threat of sexual assault from white men on this plantation. And so that summer when they were in Philadelphia, she was able to make contact with the Vigilance Committee.
She was one of only 3 people believed to have escaped from Stagville.
This site is the only surviving set of slave quarters from the Benahan Cameron plantation.
This site, known as Horton Road, has the only 2-story slave quarters remaining in North Carolina. Anywhere from 20 to 30 people lived in these 4-room structures, but most did not.
Many families here were forced to live in buildings that were small, 1-room log cabin houses, often with almost no window openings in the space and with very little insulation or ventilation.
A doll made of rough cotton cloth found in the eaves of one of the buildings provides a small glimpse of one of the few joys of enslaved children. 2 sticks hidden inside the walls of a building, treasured items linked to West African tradition.
Faith believed that placing those items into the building would help to protect and give safekeeping to the people who were living in that house.
And the house, built by enslaved people, carpenters, stonemasters, and brickmasons. In the summer of 1850, 1,000 bricks were made here by hand.
So you can see someone's thumbprint right there in that brick. You can see someone's fingers on the edge of that brick. And this is a very small child's foot here. Probably a very young person, maybe their mother or father was carrying them with them to where they were working.
Human stories and insights.
Absolutely, and we've treasured these marks because those fingerprints are so individual, right? You visualize the person whose thumb, whose finger pressed into that clay and made that mark here.
And help make North Carolina what it is today. The remains of historic Stagville consist of 71 acres. Liggett and Myers Tobacco Company, which owned the land for decades, donated some of the land to the state, which now operates it as a historic site.
I can't imagine how many stories are there. But something that I want to get key is it opens to the public.
Absolutely, that's the thing, a lot of people don't know it's there. I talk to people who went to school in Durham and didn't know it existed. Yes, you just call the site and you can get organized tour, you can just go in.
Today it's only February 6th. My understanding this is the first of many sites and locations are going to be profiled with historical significance during sites.
Absolutely, we're gonna be traveling to Gilbert College, the woods of Gilbert College, and talking about the Underground Railroad, and we'll be also visiting some.
So, Durham's namesake and founding, how did we get from Stagville here? The town was named after Dr. Bartlett Snipes Durham, this guy up here, who in 1849 offered the newly formed North Carolina Railroad a 4-acre tract of his land to build a station in order to connect the eastern part of the state to the Piedmont. To recognize his gift, the railroad named the station after Dr. Durham, simply calling it Durham's Station. This railroad was built through when I went to Stagville, one of the tour guides said that the railroad was predominantly built by enslaved people at Stagville. So Durham became connected to the rest of the area through the forced labor of enslaved people at Stagville. The collection of houses and stores that sprang up around the station were known as Durhamville, which was eventually shortened to Durham. Durham City's official birthday is April 26, 1853, when the U.S. Post Office was established. It was incorporated on April 10, 1869 by the General Assembly of North Carolina. In 1881, Durham County was officially established, separating it from Orange County. And it was, Durham was built out of Orange and Wake. Durham was nicknamed the Bull City in the late 1800s when the Blackwell Tobacco Company named its product Bull Durham Tobacco. And this is one of the advertisements from 1870. Hayti and Blackwell Street. So this era goes roughly from 1866 to the 1970s. I do want to recognize that Black history in Durham is a lot bigger and greater than Hayti and Blackwell Street. But as I was mostly concentrated in downtown Durham, most of my research focused on Hayti. It might be super hard to see, especially for those of you online, but the backdrop of this slide is a hand-drawn map of downtown Durham, specifically Hayti, that was done in about 1900. And again, this can be found on the North Carolina Collection website. Immediately following the end of the Civil War, collections of Black freedmen and freedwomen moved from worshiping in white churches and instead worshiped in the homes or on the land of African Americans in their community. Because there were not any formally constructed Black churches, worshipers would congregate when a Black missionary was available to preach. One such of these small congregations led to the eventual formation of White Rock Baptist Church, which officially formed in 1878 with their first acquisition of land, but which is cited as beginning in 1866 in the home of Margaret Ruffin Fawcett. Reverend Zuck Horton and Reverend Samuel Daddy Hunt were the first ministers of what became White Rock Baptist Church. In 1877, the Colored Missionary Baptist Church was deeded a sum of land, and it's from this that White Rock Baptist became what it is. So we don't know for certain. There is speculation that both Hayti and White Rock Baptist Church were born from a visit of a founding member's trip to Haiti, the world's first Black-led republic and first independent Caribbean state where another White Rock Baptist Church is located. Other historians indicate the church was named for a large white flint rock found on the property deeded to the Colored Missionary Baptist Church in 1877. And as an aside, Dr. Augustus Shepard, father of Dr. James E. Shepard, and who is the founder of the North Carolina Central University, led the congregation of White Rock Baptist Church between 1901 and 1911. Along White Rock, the Hayti community congregated around a second church, what we know now as St. Joseph's African Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1868, Edie and Markham, an African-American Methodist Episcopal missionary and former slave, established a church on property bought from Minerva Fowler. According to the Hayti Heritage Center's website, 4 posts were anchored in the ground, surrounded at the top with 4 boards covered with branches forming the roof. The ground was the floor. Those who came to worship brought boxes, chairs, and homemade stools, or sat on the bare ground. As winter approached, the little band of worshipers and Reverend Markham built a log cabin. More members were added to the 6 who organized the church that was called Union Bethel AME Church. Reverend Markham left Durham in 1870. 2 more frame structures were built, the first by Reverend George Hunter. As the congregation grew and more pastors came, it was decided by the members and pastors that a brick structure was needed. Under the leadership of Reverend Andrew Chambers, the church flourished. The cornerstone was laid by the Masons in 1891, and the name was changed to St. Joseph's Church. You can kind of see, if you are able to look at the map at some point, Hayti extended along Fayetteville Street, Pettigrew, and Pine Street. It had about 5,000 residents, including a large Black middle class, many of whom attended North Carolina's Central University, which at the time was called North Carolina College of Negroes. Black citizens boasted the highest rates of home ownership and per capita income in the nation during that time, according to a 1999 article titled Durham, Home to Original Black Wall Street by the WRAL. So this is Margaret Fawcett, Molly Markham, and Ian Markham.
Is that what the street's named for down here? Markham? Could be.
Probably.
Is.
Yeah. So on the left here is White Rock Baptist Church. This is the brick structure that was built in 1890 by one of the pastors. And then on the right side is the steeple of St. Joseph's A&E. That one is circa 1950. I tried to find the oldest pictures that I could of the churches. And there aren't any like really good clear pictures of St. Joseph's. So I got one from the 1950s.
Beautiful.
Aren't they gorgeous? This is a street map of Durham from 1881, so the year that it was made into a county. This is the city of Durham. This is a bird's eye view of Durham from 1891. These maps, by the way, are also available from the county of Durham. It's just durhamnc.gov. So Black Wall Street. In the early 20th century, Durham was home to dozens of African-American businesses, including grocery stores, training schools, fish and meat merchants, a haberdashery, shoe supply and repair store, theaters, and restaurants. Parish Street in Durham constituted what today would be called an enterprise zone, propelled by the Bull City's African-American businessmen. Nationally recognized business district acquired the name Black Wall Street. The 4-block area complemented the Hayti community just to the south, the principal residential district for Black Durham residents, and center of the city's educational, cultural, and religious life. In a period when race relations elsewhere in North Carolina and the US were at an all-time low, Durham's Black businessmen, with a tacit support or tolerance at any rate of their white counterparts, made strides. John Merrick, Dr. Aaron Moore, and C.C. Spalding, the triumvirate at the head of the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company, the nation's largest Black-owned insurance company, moved their headquarters in 1906 to Parish Street, to be joined by Mechanics and Farmers Bank, founded by R.B. Fitzgerald and W.G. Person in 1907. The mutual leaders had other ventures, among them real estate and textiles. When W.E.B. Du Bois visited in 1912, he recorded an unparalleled level of Black entrepreneurship, crediting the tolerant attitude of the city's white entrepreneurs and writing, "It is precisely the opposite spirit in places like Atlanta." Booker T. Washington visited in 1910, incited the ambition and thrift of the residents. Urban renewal in the 1960s had a destructive effect on Durham's Black business community, especially Hayti, but by that time, the heyday of Parish Street had passed. So this is the North Carolina, it used to be called the North Carolina Mutual and Provident Association. On October 20th, 1898, that's a very different date, John Merrick, James E. Shepard, C.C. Spalding, Dr. Aaron McDuffie Moore, and 3 others met to organize the North Carolina Mutual and Provident Association, later renamed North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company. The company was incorporated in February 1899 and opened to Black Durham residents in April 1899. NC Mutual was the first Black-owned insurance company in North Carolina, and by the mid-20th century, the largest in the United States. The company was in operation until its liquidation in October 2022. So it just recently closed. This is Lincoln Hospital. This picture is circa 1910. Financed by the Duke family and founded by John Merrick, Dr. Stanford L. Warren, and Dr. Aaron McDuffie Moore, Lincoln Hospital was an African-American hospital in Durham staffed with Black doctors and Black nurses. The hospital was in operation from 1901 to 1976 and served the Black community with health care, health education programs, specialized clinics, and free medical care. Lincoln Hospital offered residency and nursing and surgery programs to Black medical professionals. These are images of North Carolina Central University around 1910. Established in 1909 by Dr. James E. Shepard, North Carolina Central University in Durham was the first state-supported liberal arts college for African-American students in North Carolina. In the beginning, the college was known as the National Religious Training School and Chautauqua, possibly named for the Chautauqua movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which sought to bring education and culture to small towns in the U.S. The school's purpose was the development of young African-American men and women into citizens with fine character and sound academic training. Other iterations of the school were named the National Training School, the Durham State Normal School, the North Carolina College for Negroes, and North Carolina College at Durham, until it was given university status and renamed North Carolina Central University. This is the Durham Colored Library, which is now known as the Stanford L. Warren Library. On the corner of Fayetteville and Pettigrew Streets, circa 1910s. I believe this first one on the left is about 1916, when the library actually opened, and the one on the opposite side is, I think, circa 1917, with the first librarian, Hayti. Renamed the Stanford L. Warren Library in 1940, Durham Colored Library began in the basement of White Rock Baptist Church in 1913 and opened on Fayetteville and Pettigrew on August 14, 1916. It was the second African-American library to open in North Carolina. The first one was in Charlotte. The Warren Library is part of the Durham County Library System, but is currently still closed, I believe. I think it's opening soon-ish, maybe. We don't know. To be continued. So this is a picture of part of Fayetteville Street, Pettigrew Street. In Hayti, so we have the Biltmore Hotel. On the, as you go to the right, you also have the Regal Theater, And then apparently a very popular restaurant, which I'm very sad doesn't exist anymore, called the Donut Shop. I would like to eat there. This is a example, that's a word, of some of the schools that existed to help local residents learn skills. So this is the Shelley Shoe School, say that properly, on Pettigrew Street, circa 1940. And then we have W.E.B. Boyce, who is quoted as saying in the World's Work in 1912, he says, "Today there is a singular group in Durham where a black man may get up in the morning from a mattress made by black men in a house which a black man built out of lumber which black men cut and planed. He may put on a suit which he bought at a colored haberdashery and socks knit at a colored mill. He may cook victuals from a colored grocery on a stove which black men fashioned. He may earn his living working for colored men, be sick in a colored hospital, and buried from a colored church. And the Negro Insurance Society will pay his widow enough to keep his children in a colored school. This is surely progress." So briefly, I'm going to go through desegregation and civil rights. So this is circa the 1930s to the 1970s. I don't have it on here because of brevity of time, but there is a civil rights exhibit. I'm having a great time saying words today. There's an exhibit from the Durham County Library System that goes through the civil rights timeline that you can find on the Google. So one of the first major things that happened in Durham was the Royal Ice Cream sit-in. Before the 1960 Greensboro sit-ins, a similar protest occurred in Durham. Royal Ice Cream Company had different entrances and seating for its black and white patrons, and on June 23rd, 1957, Reverend Douglas Moore and 6 other Asbury Temple Methodist Church members entered the ice cream parlor through the white-only door and took up booths in nonviolent protest. All 7 protesters were arrested and charged with trespassing. The Royal Ice Cream faced boycotts and picket protests into the 1960s. Desegregation of Durham schools. By the way, if anybody is interested in the history of Durham schools, I am doing a bunch of research on that right now. Desegregation of Durham schools. Brown v. Board of Education ended school segregation in 1954, but by 1960, Durham schools were still segregated. Beginning in 1960, attorneys Conrad Person, Hugh Thompson, Floyd McKissick, William A. Marsh Jr., and John H. Wheeler, working for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, sued the Durham County Board of, or I think it was the Durham City Board of Education actually, to cease the delay of integration. Thanks to the efforts of these attorneys, Durham County schools were ordered to be fully integrated. Durham City schools were ordered to be fully integrated by January 1970, and they were. Malcolm X and MLK Jr. in Durham. MLK Jr. made several visits to Durham, including the one pictured here on February 2nd, 1960. And actually, Reverend Douglas Moore is pictured in here as well. And during this particular visit, Dr. King spoke to a standing room only audience at White Rock Baptist Church. He is quoted saying, "Let us not fear going to jail if the officials threaten to arrest us for standing up for our rights. Maybe it will take this willingness to stay in jail to arouse the dozing conscience of our nation." And then this image of Malcolm X in April of 1963. Malcolm X appeared at the Page Auditorium in Roxborough, or on Roxborough Street, where he debated Floyd McKissick, one of the NAACP lawyers and the local civil rights activists in Durham. This is one of my personal favorite protests that the Carolina Theater is remiss to talk about. This is the round robin protest at the Carolina Theater in 1962. Protesters began picketing Durham movie theaters, including the Carolina Theater. When the management of the Carolina Theater refused to desegregate, protesters began a rolling line protest that lasted for months. When a protester approached the picket with the ticket window and was refused admittance to the white section of the theater, he or she went to the back of the line to try again. And as you can see, the line went way all down the block.
So shameful.
Movie theaters, as well as most hotels and restaurants, and public swimming pools and libraries in Durham desegregated in 1963. As an aside, some of those swimming pools at schools were cemented over, so nobody got to swim, because if nobody can swim, then Black people can't swim in white swimming pools. This is another of the civil rights demonstrations. This is in response to the Orangeburg protests. The civil rights movement took a deadly turn on February 8th, 1968 in Orangeburg, South Carolina. With tension high after 2 days of demonstrations against segregation at the town's only bowling alley, students of South Carolina State College rallied around a bonfire on campus. A scuffle broke out when police tried to extinguish the fire, and a highway patrolman fired his pistol into the air, attempting to restore order. Other officers began firing into the crowd. 3 students were killed and 27 were wounded. The Orangeburg Massacre was the first such incident at an American college, predating the shootings at Kent State University in Ohio by 2 years. The coordinated series of sympathy protests began across the Carolinas and Virginia. On February 15th, Black students from North Carolina College, which is now NCCU, the Durham Business College, Duke University, and Durham High Schools gathered at 5 points in downtown Durham to protest the killings in South Carolina. Then we have the Allen Building takeover at Duke University in 1969. Dozens of students, most from the Afro-American Society, barricaded themselves in the Allen Building at Duke University. Demands included an African-American Studies Department, a Black student union, protection from police harassment, and increased enrollment and financial support for Black students. The Duke administration issued an ultimatum demanding the students leave the building or the police would be called. People leaving the building led to clashes with police who fired tear gas into the crowd, leading to further protests. More things change. Urban renewal and gentrification. So this goes from about the 1930s to what we are currently going through. Redlining in Durham, beginning in the 1930s. Redlining and urban renewal policies have had a long reach in the economic disparities and gentrification felt in Durham. Neighborhoods that were characterized by detrimental influences in a pronounced degree, including the presence of a lower grade population, i.e. African Americans and poor people, were deemed hazardous to mortgage lenders and were graded D or red. The Homeowners Loan Corporation maps and the racism they encoded guided decisions by both private and government actors that led to disinvestment and sustained neglect in redlined areas. These maps directly contributed to disinvestment in poor urban American neighborhoods, which were predominantly Black. Residential segregation prohibited African Americans from moving to neighborhoods where credit was more readily available, even if they had the funds to do so. The denial of credit within redlined neighborhoods put homeownership and all its security and wealth building opportunities out of reach for most residents. Redline areas were not all poor, but according to the HOLC maps, they were all characterized by their Blackness. I encourage you to look at your HOAs and your home community pamphlets or whatever, because some of them still have race encoded, like Black people can't live here. Some people, some company organizations have failed to come through all of their things, and again, there are still race encoded things in some of those documents. For decades, Durham's Black businesses, professionals, and institutions created and sustained a prosperous, largely segregated middle class. This outward affluence obscured the vast gulf between rich and poor in Durham. Visitors to Durham's poor Black neighborhoods were marked on the narrow, unpaved, and unlighted streets, the uniformly dilapidated houses with non-existent plumbing, and abundant rats and cockroaches. The Black poverty rate in 1970 was 37%.
Where was this picture taken?
Sorry?
Where was this picture taken?
This was in Hayti.
In Hayti.
Yeah, in downtown Durham.
It looks like the houses on Alston Avenue a little bit, you know, that part of.
Oh, yeah,
North
yeah,
Alston.
and actually, so in the right picture, there's actually, I think it's like the CCMB,
Yeah.
CCBM, yeah, that's that building, so that's right in that area. And as you can see, so you've got children on the backs of these dilapidated houses, and then literally right behind them are outhouses, because these are homes that didn't have indoor plumbing. And 2 streets away, you could find beautiful homes with running water, indoor plumbing, all of that. And these are circa the 50s, I think. So I wanted to also include redline maps of Durham. This is actually, you can actually find these online. The University of Richmond, I believe, has all of the redline maps available, and all of the information that was encoded in them available. This one is specifically for Durham, and I wanted to include 2 of the areas here that are specifically Hayti. So Hayti is D6. The clarifying remarks say, white population largely on McMahon Street for about 2 blocks south of Railroad, and some on South Street. And on McMahon Street are several fairly nice homes. This was formerly a good white residential street, but Negroes are gradually taking up the area. And Black inhabitants of this area were clerks, mechanics, laborers, and domestics. C7, which was the wealthier aspect of Hayti, says, in this section live most of the Negroes with better incomes. There are some nice residents in the area, but where you find one good one, there is likely to be adjoining it on either or both sides a house of much lower grade and quality. And the residents in these areas were Negro professional men, insurance men, mechanics, and laborers. So these were wealthy people, but their resident areas were graded very low because of the color of their skin. The promise of urban renewal. A white student group from UNC Chapel Hill in roughly 1957 to 1958 selected Durham as a prime candidate for the federal Urban Renewal Project. The federal government funneled money to American cities to acquire, demolish, and redevelop areas considered blighted under a program known as urban renewal. In reality, urban renewal programs across the US targeted communities of color for demolition and displacement. Black communities situated close to central business districts were specifically targeted because of their valuable proximity to downtown. Durham was no exception. Beginning in 1958 and continuing until the 1970s, Durham City Planning undertook a multi-million-dollar federal urban renewal program that promised to redevelop, repair, and rebuild downtown and 6 historically Black neighborhoods in Durham in the Hayti Elizabeth Street section. Portions of these areas have fallen to disrepair and were labeled slums and blighted. The Black and poor communities of Durham were promised that urban renewal made it possible for a community to acquire and clear slum or blighted property, improve streets and provide utilities, and then resell the land at public sale for industrial, commercial, and residential development to create good neighborhoods and prevent future slums. And we have access to all of these. The North Carolina collection in Durham has an entire collection of Durham Urban Renewal records, which you can see. You can see all of these in person, but they are also available online through digital ink. The destruction of Hayti. By mid-century, Durham's Black community would begin hitting hard times. African-American neighborhoods across Durham County lost their prominent presence. As urban renewal got underway, homes and land were bought from residents and placed in the residents were placed in temporary housing with paid rent for a period of 6 to 12 months, with nothing afterwards. As the project continued and residents were forced out with no timeline of promises kept, it became clear that the promise of renewal had failed. Those homes that they were put into, by the way, were also demolished. So they got to live there for maybe upwards of 2 years, and then they had nowhere to go. Unbeknownst to Durham's poor residents, Highway 147 was to be the main feature of the Urban Renewal Project. Its mission to connect Durham to Raleigh and the RTP. Instead of the repairs and rebuilds they were promised, residents watched as Hayti and Black Wall Street, as they knew it, were destroyed to make way for the Durham Freeway, cutting through the heart of the Hayti community and splitting the community in its business district. With swaths of neighborhoods destroyed and some 4,057 households and 502 businesses across Durham demolished, protests of urban renewal were common in the 60s and 70s. More recently, Durham's Black community is faced with a 21st century two-step version of urban renewal. Step one is the systematic disinvestment in Black communities, followed by gentrification. So this is an overlay of a current map and a 1955 aerial of two of the areas. So Project R17 is Hayti, and Project R16 is Matthews Street and the American Tobacco Company. So that's what they looked like before. And this is Hayti, before and after urban renewal. Everything was destroyed. And as you can see, all of this residential neighborhood areas were completely obliterated and the Durham Freeway was put in. There are some businesses there now. There's actually a couple of vacant lots that still have foundation of Hayti homes that they never did anything with. So I'm going to read a little bit of an excerpt from someone who used to live in Hayti. His name is Lawrence Frichdle. He says, "They appeased us in a way when they moved us. All of Hayti in that area over from Roxborough Street to Alston Avenue, Pettigrew, that section, that was all Black. There were many houses, but they tore all that stuff down. They widened both of the streets for the expressway to come in. They moved people. In neighborhoods like this, they put up the cinder block shacks and things they got down there. And believe it or not, people had, a lot of people over there in the wintertime didn't have glass windows. Their roofs leaked, they had holes in the floor, and they put them in a sound house, so they felt better. Then they started building projects. And I think they built McDouglas's in the 50s. And people hadn't had tile floors, a bathroom, heat on the wall, and they thought they were getting something, you know? Urban renewal was good, they thought. Then they put up Fayetteville Street, Cornwallis. One of the things that they destroyed by that was they put people so far apart from each other. I think they destroyed our spirit de corpus. You know, I want to fix my house like I want, and then everybody have the same type house. They know exactly where you are. They tore up your businesses. Hayti and Fayetteville Street was a common denominator. If you wanted a haircut, you wanted your nails done, you want to go to the movies, you need to go to the drugstore, you want to go to the liquor store, you had to go to Hayti for lots of reasons. You had to find a dime, a clothing store, a furniture store, dry cleaner, hospital, doctor's offices. But now urban renewal comes up and the doctors move. Now in Durham, once upon a time, the Black community was so closely knitted because of the way they had things. You could go to Hayti and run into someone even if you didn't know where they lived. Now, I saw some people that I hadn't seen in 15 years and they tell me they're living in Durham, but they live way out in Oxford Manor somewhere. The interviewer asks, so communities became more isolated and separate? And Mr. Rigdal says, they put shopping centers, stores, there's no more community thing. And the people that live over on this side of town, they've got a shopping center. They don't have to come to this shopping center. So really, we don't have nothing to make our paths cross. Our paths don't ever have to cross. And I think it was done by design, maybe not.
Still going on too.
Absolutely it is. Love that. I want to take a second to think about gentrification as colonization in the 21st century. Developers, realtors, bankers, investors, planners, architects, engineers, and politicians often have a hand in this redevelopment and displacement phenomenon and act as capitalists in the idealized neo-urban frontier. These actors frequently serve as the elite, assuring that specific plans and policies are established for urban redevelopment, and they rarely disclose their proposals to the consumers or longtime residents, akin to colonialism. Thus, the argument here is that these elitists operate exclusively between themselves, serving as venture capitalists, while the consumers are largely left unaware of their relocating implications on the local community, similar to Atlantic New World and Western frontiers in North America. One of the main features of Mr. Rigdal's interview is that he mentions the only Black people in Hayti that knew about 147 and what urban renewal actually was going to be, or what he calls the upper crust, or he also calls them the North Carolina Mutual Blacks, the Black people in the community that had money and would benefit from the redevelopment. So it wasn't specifically or exclusively white people. There were Black elite within the community that were involved in the destruction of Hayti as well.
Can you identify those Black people?
I don't personally have the records. Mr. Rigdal identifies them mostly as like families like the Merricks or Spaldings, people like that. You can actually find this interview. It's Lawrence Rigdal interview. UNC Chapel Hill has it available. You can read the entire thing. And he does mention, I believe, explicit families in there. I have a bibliography of references that I have available if anybody wants or needs it. And that is one of the references is in there. So you'd be able to find it very easily. Effects of gentrification. Some of the effects of gentrification include increased housing disparities, increased health disparities, a decrease in local resources and revenue, decrease in employment opportunities, an increase in crime, addiction, gang activity. As affluent newcomers move in and as jobs become increasingly stratified by education and income, rising prices and social dislocation are pushing out the original residents, who are often poor or working class and Black. In 2018, the poverty and child poverty rates in Durham were 18.5% and 27% respectively, higher than both state and national averages. Within that 18.5%, 8.4% were non-Hispanic white, 17.4% were Asian, 23.5% were Black, 29.9% were unidentified, presumably Indigenous, with 32.4% Hispanic or Latino. almost a third, or 33% of African American and Latino households as of 2018 have zero or negative net worth. Durham faces a citywide housing shortage. While housing is at a premium near downtown, the availability of residential property throughout the city is extremely low, with 0.1% vacancy in 2016. Renters face the most severe housing cost burdens. Almost half of the renters in the city are rent burdened. 22% of renters pay more than half of their income on rent and utilities alone. I helped write portions of the history section of the county health assessment, which will be coming out in the next couple of months. Definitely take a look at it because it gives a lot of information regarding health in the community and will help point to some of the disparities that have happened because of gentrification. I'm going to end this with a video that was done by a student at Central University. This can be found on the Campus Echo online, which is NCCU's student newspaper.
Okay.
There's us here and this.
Well, I would just like to see the city of Durham move forward with a lot of things. The first thing on my agenda I would like to see them do is to, like I say, some of these vacant buildings, big buildings that we have, you know, make them into shelters for the homeless, because Durham is growing with homeless people and jobless.
I remember a gentleman named Bible, James White Sr. used to own half the South Side. And now it's a bunch of realtors and things like that. Demographics changed. Neighborhoods where there were black faces, you can see a mix of a little bit of white faces, some Hispanic. The thing is, the buildings that they're putting up nowadays, the new condominiums, the townhouses on Trinity Avenue, those on co-ops on 147, the West End always been black. I know even black faces living in there. I know they can't afford it.
That's one of the problems that you see happening in your will gentrification. We take the people by way of what's called eminent domain, displace them because you can't afford to live where we're going to put you here. We don't have any plans to help you stay where we want to build. So we're going to take you because you're not the element that we want to live in the state. We're going to put you into this box. As we put you into this box, we can forget about you. Forget about you, guess what's going to happen? I don't think about myself, so why should I think about my neighbor?
I don't know what we had. We cried for help. We really wasn't. We really no one available to help us. We need help. It's a condition in which to live from the top to the bottom. There's not one thing good to say about the neighborhood, simply that change. There's still a lot of drugs, there's a lot of prostitution, there's a lot of people being taken for granted down the streets, on the street, to see what's happening. About this community. This community is going down to the peas. I don't mean it in literally as being nasty. I mean it that nobody cares about what's going on around this community. I need someone to help solve the problem. Unemployment. These people who are walking the street, job. Truthfully, I feel sold out. I feel sold out. See, I look at it from, I'm going to study from the perspective of the actual thing. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people in the African American community are justice involved. And nowadays, that's an issue of disenfranchisement and exclusion in education, employment, and yes, housing. So definitely some imbalance as far as the community goes. Who's able to move to a neighborhood, who's able to maintain the housing in the neighborhood, and who's able to hold on to the neighborhood once the city finds out it's more profitable to take over and put up subdivisions and partner with these build developers and things. $20 million for that new courthouse. They're spending $71 million on the new police station. Add the numbers up, that's almost 200 million. What did they give that to African Americans? I know they didn't cool 10 million since 2012 to the present now. That's what I want to say. Wake up, black people. So
I think affordable housing is a racial equity issue. And in the, with the history of racism and racial oppression in the United States, it's impossible to separate racial issues from economic issues. They're just so intertwined with everything, that happens in this country and in this city. The fact that that reorganization and gentrification are happening in these low-income, predominantly Black and Brown communities is a direct result of the fact that these communities have been disinvested in for decades. And so they are the communities, with the land that's like right close to downtown, right close to a venue, so really unreasonably artificially low land values because of the lack of investment by cities and communities in those areas. And so for me, it's important that people be able to stay in the communities where they live. It's not enough for us to just build affordable housing and have that housing be, way out east past Highway 98 or north or is cheaper. These people who have been living in these communities in Northeast Central Durham for decades and for generations deserve to have their communities remain a place where they can afford to live and work and, and play and raise their kids. And I think that people have that right and have the right to stay. And so I want to see us as a city be making sure that we are prioritizing neighborhood stabilization. So making sure that people are able to stay in their communities as opposed to just building something wherever.
What we call redlining, meaning that there were restrictions as to where banks and other financial lending agencies would lend money. And so though they're seen as high risk, in all likelihood would not receive funds, or persons could not receive funds to sort of purchase or buy a home. And so as a result of that, you'll find that by 1940s, African Americans in Durham claim a very significant share of the home ownership here in this county, in the city and county. And as a result of that, it had really garnered a very strong reputation in terms of home ownership. And that included not just the Hayti community, the footprint on Parent Street, Black Wall Street, Hickstown, Crest Street, the East End, the West End, of course, and Little Mexico, which is combined with Roxborough and which used to be called Pine Street. So you start seeing these ideas of redevelopment. And so now the net result of that is that what were large intact African communities are now not as intact and as historical as they used to be.
Well, when I was on my priorities of the city council, and we worked hard as we can to try to work on one home. And, figure out one home. The whole house, fixed incomes. What I don't want to see is that suddenly we don't have all of the that's what you see overall. It wants something. That's what you see on my homes. It's bad. We talk about fixed income.
Community really goes great, I think, when you marry concerns and issues of people who are the residents.
Thank you for this well-done presentation.
I wanted to, starting for especially the people online that have been watching, maybe couldn't hear the videos. The closed captions are very unreliable, but they all are available on YouTube. The first one is just Stagville Plantation news reel that was done. And the second one is called Promises Made. You can find it on the Campus Echo online, and you can also find it on YouTube.